Summary. Ready. Set. Go! Loudmouth George tells everyone that he is going to win the big race. He's so confident that he doesn't even practice for the race. What do you think will happen on the day of the big race? Is George going to win and prove to everyone that he is more than just all talk? Or will he become a Loudmouth George until he races again and wins? Loudmouth George and the Big Race by Nancy Carlson. Look, said Harriet. There's going to be a 2-mile race. I'm going to enter. Me too, said Ralph. How about you, George? Sure, said George. 2 miles will be a breeze for me. I'm going to start training right now, said Harriet. Me too, said Ralph. How about you, George? You guys can train all you like, said George. I'm going to beat you anyway. I'll start my training tomorrow. That night, George went to bed early. He set his alarm clock for 5 o'clock. Professional runners run early in the morning, he said. But when 5 o'clock came, George just couldn't get up. Smart professional runners run later, he mumbled, and he went back to sleep. It was noon when George finally came downstairs. Going running, George? Asked his mother. In the midday sun? Said George. Do you want me to get a heat stroke? I'll run tonight, when it's cooler. After dinner, George got interested in a television show. I can start training tomorrow, he said. In the morning, George saw Harriet jog by. She looks terrible, said George. I'd better get out there and show her how it's done. But when George got downstairs, his mother was making pancakes. It'll wait till after breakfast, said George. After breakfast, George was too full to run. I'm going to really train hard after dinner, he said. I may even run 10 miles. That night after dinner, Uncle Chuck stopped by. Who wants to go to the movies? With me? He asked. I do, said George. On their way, Harriet passed them. Training for the big race? Said Uncle Chuck. I sure am, said Harriet. I can run 1.5 miles now. How about you, George? You bet, said George. And I don't even start my real training until tomorrow. The next day, it rained. The day after that, George had swimming lessons. The day after that, it was too windy to run. The day after that, it was too cold. The day after that, it was too hot. Finally, the day of the big race arrived. Boy, am I scared, said Harriet. Not me, said George. A 2-mile race is nothing for me. Just a walk in the park. The gun fired, and the racers were off. George ran out fast, ahead of everyone. Just like I thought, he said to himself. I'm in first place already. After about 2 blocks, George began to feel a little out of breath. First, Harriet passed him. Then, Ralph. By the end of the first mile, almost everyone had passed him. George felt really tired. Finally, he made it to the finish line. Just in time to see Harriet get her trophy. She took first place. George sat down under a tree to catch his breath. "I've been looking all over for you," said Harriet. "How did you do?" Not very well," George admitted. "My shoes were too tight." "Don't feel too bad, George," said Harriet. "There's a 3-mile race in 2 weeks. I'm going to start training this afternoon. Want to run with me?" "This afternoon?" said George. "Gee, I don't think so, Harriet. I'm kind of tired. I'll start training tomorrow."